Welcome to Mad Marketing TV. My name is Jeff Ogden, the host of the show, and I'm really excited about today's guest. I'm a professional writer. I've written several white papers, and I've got the top expert in the country on white papers with us today. So let's meet him. We're going to talk about today crafting next generation white papers for a social media oriented reader, because the world has really changed from just printing out a PDF and reading it. He's personally written over, my goodness, 350 B2B white papers. He's the acclaimed author of Crafting White Paper 2.0 book, which I've read and reviewed. He writes the White Paper Pundit blog, and he's been doing this for a long time. He's written white papers for Microsoft, Apple, J.D. Edwards, etc. What we're going to talk about today are three things: how social media promotes short attention spans, why traditional all-text white papers are becoming less effective, and we're going to talk specifically how to craft the next generation white paper for the social media reader. So let's meet Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Really glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about talking about white papers. And one thing I love about white papers is, unlike most things that have a half-life of a week, white papers live a long time and they generate leads for a long time. I wrote a white paper 3 years ago and it's still generating leads today.
That's true.
It's amazing how powerful they are. But let's talk. Social media has really revolutionized the whole idea of long-form writing like white papers. What is your take on how it's been affected by social media?
Well, if you look at most social media-oriented information, it's what I like to call abbreviated information. Most social media posts are essentially a couple of lines with a hyperlink, and that hyperlink will then take you to more extended pieces of information, such as a web page, a YouTube video, or some other form of information where that user can drill down and get larger portions of content. But if you look at most social media information, it really is promoting what I call a short attention span. We're accustomed to scanning perhaps hundreds of Twitter messages, finding ones that appeal to us either via a snappy title or perhaps a built-in video or a picture, an image, and then deciding what those aspects that will engage us, and then determining whether or not that information will be appealing to us or appeals to whatever we happen to be looking for at that time. And this form of abbreviated information is what I believe is creating a short attention span reader. And we need this kind of engagement to make a decision as to whether or not content is worthy of of our valuable time and our limited time that we have to read information. So if we find the traditional white paper or traditional document-oriented information that's just made up of streams of left flush paragraphs and nothing but text, it bores us. We don't have the time to kind of sit there and read all of that information to come up with bottom line information. So we need those engagement points. We need those pieces of information that's going to attract our attention, make a decision of the worthiness of that content, and then from there decide how we're going to drill down into information further.
That's interesting. I think you're right. The world of the reader has changed a great deal, and I think it's incumbent on the writer to do a much better job of keeping the reader's attention. Now, one thing I remember from your book, of when I read it and I reviewed it, is you talk about reading in layers. And that, what do you mean by layered reading?
Well, when you look at how someone, let's say, might download or read a brand new white paper, perhaps they might find a title that appeals to them, they'll download a white paper PDF and they'll read it. They don't read it in the same way that an author may have written it. For example, they're not going to read page 1 in its entirety and then go on to page 2 and then read that in its entirety, and 3 and so on. The layered approach, that person will first apply what I call a skim read. They'll flip through every page of that document looking for those engaging pieces of information that I referred to. Maybe it's a business chart. Maybe it's a series of bulleted information. a sidebar pull quote, or perhaps an executive summary. And as they find more and more of these visually appealing elements, that will aid in their decision point as to whether or not this white paper is worthy of spending more time in reading more of that information. As they find these pieces of information, they will apply more and more time to reading it. So if they find an engaging chart, they may read the paragraph that comes before it or comes after it. And enough of these different elements, they will form a decision that, gee, this white paper has some valuable information in it. And so as a white paper marketer, you have to have these visual engagement points throughout the document in order for today's short attention reader to be able to evaluate that white paper in a positive light, and then have them read that in its entirety.
It's interesting how readers have changed and been changed by social media and how they engage with content. And you got some good points on creating visual elements that hold their attention. One of the things, I had a guest on a show earlier, Doug Kessler from Velocity Partners in the UK. And one of his advice is, don't just go out and get content creators. Go out and get the best. So one of the things he said, just don't get a writer, get a really good writer. What is your take on a company says, okay, we want to create a white paper for our company? Do they look internally? Do they look outside? What is your recommendation about where do they look for those great writers?
Well, I think that today writing and good writing style is just one piece of the problem. I think that if you're looking for if you want to create a website, you want to find a designer that has vast experience in creating websites. Or if you want to launch a social media campaign, you want to find someone who is very adept at Facebook or LinkedIn or other forms of social media. And I think when it comes to white paper writing, I believe that you really need to have someone who understands white papers specifically, as opposed to a mainstream writer that might be writing all different kinds of copy and may not be applying some of these elements that I've mentioned to the white paper medium. Because the white paper today has become not just a document, it's more similar to a container. It now it contains not only text, but it now contains graphics, it contains video. We're starting to see new forms of white papers coming out that have integrated flash video of perhaps just a few minutes in length. And we're seeing integrated polls, interactive polls, and all of these new types of elements are now becoming this modern, what I call white paper 2.0. Having an expertise in white papers really is the new requirement, and differentiates me from a mainstream writer that may have expertise in good writing style but may not know these other elements that make up the new requirements in white paper marketing.
Very interesting stuff. Tell us about if a business, someone on this watching the show today says, I'd really like to create a white paper. What are the few tips you would give that person about creating a compelling white paper, making it that container, making it promotable on social media, getting the word out about it? How can they turn a white paper into something that generates leads for them?
Okay. Well, there are a number of elements that I would say comprise today's new modern social media oriented white paper. First, of course, is size. You have to understand that the traditional white paper that may have been 10 to 50 pages in length isn't going to fly anymore, given this new shorter attention span and social media oriented audience. I would say the maximum length of a modern commercial white paper is somewhere between 6 to 10, with the sweet spot being 6 to 8 pages. And so given that short size, you now have to say, how can I make the most of this limited size? Number one, I would say you need to have a good design, very similar to a publicly traded company that sends you an annual report. You want to have a very positive impression. You want to have that white paper looking like it came from a Fortune 1000 business. So design is a very important element in a new white paper cover design, layout design, professional illustrations. You also want to have an executive summary. Given the short time span that today's busy executive has to reading information, you want to be able to encapsulate all of your key points in a one-page synopsis of that entire white paper right up front. You also want to have perhaps 2 to 3 maximum visual elements in your white paper. These can be concept graphics, which essentially distills complex messages into a single image, a single illustration to convey that particular point. Perhaps business illustrations or charts that represent statistics that verify your position that's occurring in the business community or in the industry. You also want to have a series of sidebar pull quotes on each page that summarize the single most important message on that page, so that that skim reader I referred to before can quickly grasp that essential business message on that page. And finally, you want to have a concluding summary, because invariably that skim reader who's skimming through that white paper will have a natural stop when they come to that very last page. So you want to have what I call key walkaway points, bottom line business advantage messages that that reader should take with them, or that they should understand and retain when they close out that final page of the white paper. All of these and many more are just some of the elements that comprise the new style in white paper marketing. But if I was to come up with 4 or 5 that I think are important, those would probably be the most important ones that are missing from most all-text white papers, but are needed now to engage this, what I call short attention span business reader.
Jonathan, these have been some great tips, and one thing we love to do on the show is really focus on the how-to kind of aspects. And on the after-party portion, I'm sure we can get into these in a little bit more detail. But before we go, I want to just ask, how would someone watching this show learn about you and Appam Group and what you do?
Sure, be happy to give them information on that. First would be my blog, which is whitepaperpundit.com. I do a weekly post on my blog. Also, I have a series of free white papers they can download. One, which is called Ensuring That Your White Papers Appeal to Busy Executive Readers, which is a synopsis of several of the points we've talked about today. And there's my book, which is Crafting White Paper 2.0, Designing Information for Today's Time and Attention Challenged Business Reader, which will give them a lot of these very critical points about how to craft a modern commercial white paper to appeal to today's social media-oriented reader. And you can find that on my site as well.
Thanks, Jonathan. So basically, check out whitepaperpundit, pundit.com, and the Appam Group, and download that white paper and engage with them and learn. There's a lot of good information on that site. Before we wrap up the show, we want to thank our sponsors for the show, because without them, the show would not exist. First and foremost is Acton Software, marketing automation software for the Fortune 5 million. You can learn at Acton by going to www.actonsoftware.com. In addition, on the lower right, you see Watchitude. They power this show. They provide the TV-like show that you see here, so they do a great job. And lastly, Avatage does a wonderful job of supporting the show and providing resources and helping us. So until next time on Mad Marketing TV, stay well, keep selling, and smile a lot. We'll see you next time.